pleased to record the lesson so we can upload it later. Right, I'm assuming, folks, that everything was okay from last week because I was able to mark your work, review the lesson, some excellent examples of the Tkinter app. I think I've still one or two to look through, but look, the purpose of last week was writing code that was easy for others to read. It's self-documenting and it used meaningful identifiers. Remember, there's a debate between the two schools of thought. One, you comment like hell. Everything should be commented within the code. And two, there's no need to comment because if everything is self-documenting and you use meaningful identifiers, there's no need for comments. You should be able to decide the happy medium for yourself. But when I looked at the examples and I put a lesson in YouTube, you should see that's clear from the examples provided. Just to remind you of the overview for the next couple of weeks, every Monday we're going to meet for our live lesson. We look at the week ahead. I will release tasks that will be due in throughout the week. I'll try and space it, one midweek, one the end of the week. And Friday's lesson will be pre-recorded. I'll look at the work that you've submitted, see if there's any general areas that need addressed, and I'll pre-record the lesson and release that for Friday's time. It should be an easy enough finish for the week for you. Right, so I'm going to share the screen and look at this week's learning and try and explain what I want you to cover this week. So first of all, before I do start, just raise your hand icon, hit that raise hand if you're seeing this screen being shared and I can begin the lesson. Right, that looks as if we're good to go. So this is our focus for the week. The idea that we're going to look at subroutines, functions, procedures, and we're going to be looking at passing parameters. And again, there'll be a theory question and there'll be a programming question for you to submit this week. It's nothing new. Well, sorry, there's one or two concepts that are new this year, but generally it's covered at GCSE. First of all is your definition of a subroutine. We talked at GCSE, a variable being a named identifier, a memory location that holds a value, a constant, a memory location that holds a constant value. Well, a subroutine is a memory location that points to a block of code. So make sure you've got a definition. It says here a section of code that performs a specific task that we can recall it over and over again. You'll remember from last year that there's two types of subroutine. There is, there's a procedure and a function. And please note the difference that a function returns a value to the main program. So get your head around three definitions. What is a subroutine? What is a procedure? What is a function? They're on screen. That's it. That's a type of low-level question that you'll get asked at AS level. Then we look at two other theoretical concepts, again covered at GCSE, a parameter and then an argument. You're familiar with this concept that you're passing in parameters. These are placeholder values. If I think back to last week's lesson or some of your code, you're binding functions or procedures to Tkinter events. And you know that a Tkinter event needs to be able to handle an event parameter. So most of you used an EVT as a parameter, a placeholder, knowing that you would pass something into your procedure or your function. So when it's just its placeholder, for example, if I have, doing with fourth years earlier, the area of a triangle, we're going to have, it takes in a base and a height. B and H in this example are parameters, and this is going to return B times H over 2. This is a function because we're using the return value. So you've got your definition of parameters. I don't need to read through it. It's in your notes. And then when we come to arguments, if I go to call it, so I'm going to say triangle 1 equals area 6 and 4. The 6 and 4, they're arguments, they're actual values that I'm passing into the function, or if it was a procedure. So you can go through your notes on procedures and functions. There's a slideshow there. All it really is, guys and girls, is definitions. We come to this next, another definition, and it's the scope of variables. And I'm pretty confident that you've grasped this because you've been using it in your programming. if I look at this function here, B and H in here, they're local to that function. Their scope only persists within that function. I cannot access B and H within the main program. They're local to that. That's why I use the return value. If I want to make them accessible in the main program, we're returning them into it. So we've got this concept of the scope of variables, where they actually persist. Are they global and accessible throughout? Are they local and can only be accessed within the procedure or the subroutine? So that's the overview of, well, that's really just a revision of GCSE. You've got additional notes with examples. I'm going to trust you to read through that again. The first task that is due this week, and I'll look at this at the end of the lesson, is the subroutines questions. There's 8 or 9 questions and they're due in on Wednesday. We'll check that at the end. What I want to cover now is something new, and it's passing by value and passing by reference when we're looking at functions. And it's probably best for me to show you an example on screen. So hopefully this will be clear. It's in your notes as well, but it probably should be easier to understand when you're seeing it. By default in Python, when we pass a variable into a function, it passes by value or by copy. If we go back to our notes, it says, look, passing by copy or pass by value. What it means is we take a copy of that memory location and we pass that into the function. So the original variable is unchanged, it's untouched. And if you can see how Python handles this in the first 8 lines of the code, I've got a variable and I've assigned the value 10 to it. I'm going to pass that into this function. It's going to print it, increment it, and print it again. And then in line 8, it's going to print the initial state. So when we run it, you will see that it prints 10. Why? Because my variable 10 was passed into it and it prints it. It increments it, it prints 11. But in line 8, it prints 10 again. Why? It was going back to the initial my variable. We have just passed that in by value, or I prefer to call it pass by copy. It takes a copy of the memory location and it's passed in and it's unchanged. Another way of passing parameters or arguments is passing by an actual reference to the memory location. So if you think somewhere on disk, there's a physical location where data resides in that memory location. And when we pass by reference, we're passing a pointer into it, and it's actually going to manipulate the data in that memory location. And Python handles non-primitive data that way. So for example, when you're working with an arrays, it will pass in a pointer or pass in a reference to that array. So I'm going to call this function, I've got a list with Bob and Sally in it, and I'm passing it into the function. It's going to pass that actual list, a reference to it. It's going to append in this string and it's going to print it. And then I'm going to print it again. And you can see here that, well, Bob and Sally was the original. It's been appended. And then I refer back to the original and you can see, unlike the variable, the actual array has been changed. There was a reference to the memory location and we've manipulated that reference. So we've got 2 new concepts introduced this year: pass by value, you can see your notes in OneNote, and pass by reference. And you've got the 2 scripts that I've just ran. So before we look at this week's work, has anyone any questions with regard pass by value, pass by reference, arguments, or parameters? Feel free to turn on your mic and question. If you're happy to continue, click the raise hand button and we'll move on to this week's work. James K. God,
No,
this is great. You're all right, James. You can't find the icon. You're a great lot. We can fly through this course. Right, so I'm going to share the screen again and look at what you will be doing this week. What have I just done? Share screen, share content. I want to share screen 1. Right. hopefully this has come online. Back to Teams. Yes, we've 2 tasks that you'll see that have been scheduled. The first one this week is the theory, and we've just looked at the questions. So if you go into Unit 1 or you go into the assignments, you can see that those 8 questions have been assigned in your OneNote. There you go, Christina's ahead of the game and PJ are ahead of the game. I look at the student view. You can go in and I'm going to ask you to answer these 9 or 10 questions. They're pretty straightforward. Argument parameter. Write them in OneNote, upload them, and I will mark them and go through them in Friday's lesson. That's the first part. The second is your practical programming, and we're just looking at functions and procedures again. And if I give an overview of this, I'm hoping that it will be pretty straightforward. Part A, straightforward functions and procedures. Part B, I hope I've included the decanter part. But I don't really care what language is, but we've got a dictionary here, and then you're passing in, it's going to return their name and a particular greeting. So the example here is pass in Sam or Randy. Hi, I'm Randy and I'm from Germany. I'm Sam and I'm from Argentina. And part B is to develop the decanter UI. So it's just to practice getting your head round, well, we're revising dictionaries, but functions and procedures. That's due, I'll just check, that's due Friday morning. Try and get that uploaded so I can do the review of the week. And again, the first deadline is Wednesday. Again, that's the 2 tasks. If we're happy with that, raise our hand. James, you can knock your microphone if you want, your secret knock.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Good, folks. Before we sign off, can I just reiterate the procedure going forward? Monday's live lesson, 2-3 tasks during the week, and then Friday will be a review. Johnny, yep, your hands up is working, I can see that. If you want to speak, Johnny, feel free to unmute. And again, Friday will be the pre-recorded lesson that I'll upload to YouTube. If you've any concerns about the course content or what you're supposed to be doing, publish it or post it on Team. And again, if it's private, you can get me at my email address, cgrind679. And just before we sign off, WJEC have not released, they were supposed to release an update on Friday. It's still pending. So at the moment, we're still preparing for our 2 papers. That's it for this week, folks. If you give me a hands up, we're out of here and you can start your questions and your programming. Right, folks, I'll upload the video of the lesson in case there's anything you want to review, and I'll chat to you next week. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.